5 years ago, David Miller buried the memory of his wife. Not in a grave, but in the far recesses of his mind, a place reserved for inconvenient truths and forgotten promises. To the world, Amelia Williams had simply vanished, a quiet, unassuming woman who walked out of her perfect Brooklyn brownstone one rainy Tuesday and never came back. David told everyone it was a tragedy, a breakdown. He grieved publicly while privately celebrating his freedom with the woman he'd been seeing for years. But memories don't stay buried forever. And Amelia Williams wasn't the woman anyone remembered. Today, in the shimmering towers of Manhattan, a new queen reigns over a billion-dollar empire, and she's finally ready to come home. The air in their Brooklyn brownstone always smelled of lemon polish and David's ambition. Amelia Williams, at 32, was the curator of this perfect life. Her days were a meticulously choreographed ballet of managing their home hosting dinner parties for David's architectural firm and ensuring his world ran with the silent, flawless efficiency of a Swiss watch. She had given up her own budding career in botanical research to become the silent partner in the David Miller success story. It was a sacrifice she had made willingly, believing her love was the foundation upon which he built his dreams. David Miller was a man carved from charm and ambition. He was the golden boy at Sterling and Vance Architecture, a rising star whose designs were lauded for their sleek modernist lines. He'd look at Amelia across a crowded room, his blue eyes crinkling at the corners, and people would sigh. "They're the perfect couple," they'd whisper. "She's his rock." But lately the rock had begun to feel the strain of invisible cracks. It started subtly. The late nights at the office became more frequent, punctuated by the sterile excuse of pushing a deadline for the Hudson Yards project. His phone, once left casually on the nightstand, was now perpetually screen down or in his pocket. When she touched his arm as he slept, he would flinch away, a gesture so small yet so thunderously loud in the quiet of their shared life. The scent of another woman had begun to cling to his clothes, not a cheap perfume, but something expensive and subtle like jasmine and sandalwood. When she'd asked about it once, he'd laughed it off. "Oh, that's probably Chloe Vance from the office. Her perfume is so strong it practically follows you home." Chloe Vance. The name hung in the air between them. She was a junior partner at the firm, a woman David described as brilliantly ruthless. Amelia had met her a few times at company events. Chloe was everything Amelia wasn't, sharp-edged, dressed in tailored pantsuits, her lipstick a slash of defiant red. She had a way of looking at David that made Amelia's skin prickle, a look that bypassed professional admiration and landed squarely in the realm of predatory possession. One Tuesday evening, the rain was lashing against the windows, a miserable, persistent drizzle that matched the feeling in Amelia's gut. David was late again. She had prepared his favorite meal, braised short ribs that had been slow cooking for 6 hours. The table was set with their wedding china. At 9 p.m., he still wasn't home. She called his cell. It went straight to voicemail. She called the office. The night security guard answered his voice, bored. "No, ma'am. Everyone from the executive floor left hours ago. Mr. Miller signed out at 5:02 p.m. The lie was a cold, sharp stone in her stomach. 5:02 p.m. He had been gone for 4 hours. 4 hours of unaccounted time. She waited the silence of the house pressing in on her. The short ribs grew cold. The candles she had lit sputtered and died. When he finally walked in just after 11 p.m., his hair was damp, and his shirt was slightly rumpled. He didn't look tired from work. He had the flushed, energized look of a man who had just been thoroughly alive. "Sorry I'm so late," he said, shrugging off his trench coat. The traffic was an absolute nightmare. Amelia stood by the dining table, her hands clasped in front of her. "The security guard at your office said you left at 5. David froze, his back to her. The carefully constructed mask of the loving husband flickered. For a moment she saw the stranger underneath. He turned slowly, his expression shifting from surprise to annoyance. "You called my office. Amy, what is wrong with you? Are you checking up on me now?" He snapped, his voice cold. "Where were you, David?" She asked, her own voice, barely a whisper. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of performative frustration. "I went for a drink with the team to decompress. Chloe, Mark, a few others. Is that a crime I needed to blow off some steam? This Hudson Yards project is killing me." He walked past her, past the elaborate uneaten dinner, and headed for the stairs. "I'm exhausted. I'm going to take a shower." He didn't notice the single perfect water ring on the mahogany side table left by a cold glass he hadn't touched. He didn't see the way her hands were trembling. He didn't see the light in her eyes, the one that had always shone for him, finally beginning to dim. As the water from his shower started to run, Amelia stood alone in the cold dining room, the beautiful life she had curated, now feeling like nothing more than a well-appointed prison. And she knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that the key to this prison was no longer in her hands. The next few days were a blur of strained politeness. David acted as if nothing had happened, becoming overly affectionate in a way that felt cloying and false. He brought her flowers, praised her cooking, and talked animatedly about their future. A future that now sounded to Amelia like a script from a hollow play. She moved through her days on autopilot, a ghost in her own home. The unspoken truth, a chasm widening between them. The breaking point didn't come with a dramatic scream, but with a quiet click of a laptop. It was a Saturday morning. David was out claiming he had an early site visit. Amelia was tidying his home office, a space she rarely entered. His laptop was open on the desk, asleep. Her hand hovered over the trackpad, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "Don't do it," a voice in her head warned. "You can't unsee what you find." But she had to know. She touched the pad, and the screen blinked to life. He hadn't even bothered to lock it. His email was open. And there it was. An entire thread with Chloe Vance. It wasn't just about work. There were pictures from a recent business trip to Chicago, pictures of them laughing in a hotel bar, a selfie with their heads close together, Chloe's red lipstick staining the rim of a wine glass. Then she saw the hotel confirmations, the Four Seasons, the Peninsula, all booked for 2. The dates corresponded perfectly with every late night, every business trip, every time he had come home smelling of jasmine and lies. The final email sent just last night was from Chloe. Subject tonight. Message: I can still feel you. I can't believe you went home to her after that. How much longer do we have to pretend, D? I want our life to start. I love you. The words blurred through Amelia's tears. I love you. He had told Amelia he loved her that very morning before he left. The hypocrisy was a physical blow knocking the air from her lungs. She scrolled further, a glutton for punishment, and found what truly broke her. It was a message from David to Chloe sent a month ago. I know. Just be patient. It's complicated. Leaving Amy isn't simple. She's dependent. She has nothing without me. No career, no real ambition. It sounds cruel, but her whole world is this house. I have to handle it delicately. But I promise you our future is what matters. You're my future. She has nothing without me." The words echoed in the silent room, stripping away 15 years of love and sacrifice, rendering her life down to a single, pathetic sentence. She wasn't his partner. She was a complication, a dependent, an obstacle to be handled delicately. When David returned that afternoon, whistling as he came through the door, he found her sitting in his office chair, the laptop screen glowing in front of her. The color drained from his face when he saw what she was looking at. "Amy, I can explain," he stammered, the charm finally failing him. "Can you?" Her voice was eerily calm, devoid of the hysteria he was clearly expecting. "Can you explain how the woman who gave up her PhD so you could finish your master's has no ambition? Can you explain how the woman who networked tirelessly at your side, charming your bosses and clients, is a complication?" He flinched. "You don't understand the context." "Oh, I understand the context perfectly," she said, standing up. For the first time, she felt taller than him. "The context is that you are a coward and a liar. You built your career on my back, and now that you're successful, you want to trade in the foundation for a newer, shinier model." His defensiveness curdled into cruelty. When cornered, David Miller didn't apologize. He attacked. "Oh, spare me the martyr act, Amelia," he sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "You loved playing the perfect wife. You loved the parties, the house, the money. Don't pretend this was some great sacrifice. What were you going to do to sell homemade potpourri at a farmer's market? I gave you this life, and frankly it's become boring. You've become boring. You have no fire, no edge. Chloe challenges me. She understands my world. You just arrange the flowers in it." Each word was a meticulously aimed dart, and they all hit their mark. He wasn't just admitting his infidelity, he was assassinating her character, her worth, her entire identity as he had shaped it. He was telling her that she was in fact nothing without him. Something inside Amelia snapped, not in a loud, explosive way, but in a quiet, final severing of a cord. The love she had felt for him, which had already been dying, turned to ash. In its place, a cold, hard resolve began to form. She didn't scream or cry. She simply looked at him, her eyes clear and steady. "Thank you, David," she said, her voice chillingly serene. "You've made everything perfectly clear." She walked out of the office, leaving him standing there amidst the digital debris of his betrayal. She went upstairs to their bedroom, the room they had shared for a decade, and opened her closet. She didn't pack the designer dresses he had bought her, or the jewelry he had gifted her, as apologies. She packed a small duffel bag with a few pairs of old jeans, some sweaters, her hiking boots, and a worn, leather-bound journal filled with her grandmother's botanical recipes and drawings. It was the one piece of her old life, the life before David, that she had kept. As the rain began to fall again, Amelia Williams walked out of the Brooklyn brownstone. She didn't look back. She had no destination in mind, only a direction away. Away from the man who thought she was nothing, and toward the woman she had forgotten she could be. Amelia drove for 17 hours, stopping only for gas and black coffee. The city skyline receded in her rearview mirror, replaced by the endless, hypnotic stretch of the interstate. She was running on adrenaline and grief, the engines hum a monotonous drone against the cacophony of David's cruel words replaying in her mind. Boring. Dependent. Nothing without me. She had no plan, no destination, until a memory surfaced from the depths of her childhood, her grandmother's cottage. It was a place she hadn't seen in 20 years, a small, forgotten property on a rugged stretch of the Oregon coast, bequeathed to her when her grandmother passed. She and David had once talked of selling it, but the paperwork was too complicated, the market too slow. It had sat there, derelict and waiting. With a new, desperate sense of purpose, she rerouted her GPS. 3 days later, she pulled onto a gravel road nearly swallowed by overgrown ferns and towering pines. The cottage was even more dilapidated than she remembered. The paint was peeling, the porch sagged, and a thick carpet of moss covered the roof shingles. But it was hers. It was a place untouched by David's influence, a sanctuary of her own making. The first few weeks were a descent into despair. The isolation was absolute, broken only by the cry of gulls and the relentless crashing of the Pacific waves against the cliffs below. There was no internet, no cell service. The silence forced her to confront the gaping wound in her life. She wept for the love she'd lost for the woman she'd allowed herself to become. She chopped wood with blistered hands, repaired the leaky roof with tar and sheer will, and learned to live with the ghosts of her past. Slowly, painfully, the wilderness outside began to heal the wilderness within. She started spending her days in her grandmother's overgrown garden. It was a chaotic jungle of weeds, but beneath the neglect, the bones were still there. Hardy rose bushes, lavender that had gone wild, and a mysterious, resilient herb garden her grandmother had cultivated with an almost mystical reverence. It was there, with her hands buried in the cool, damp earth, that Amelia started to come back to life. She found her grandmother's old journals in a dusty trunk in the attic. They were filled not just with recipes for jams and pies, but with detailed instructions for creating salves, tinctures, and facial oils from the plants in the garden. Her grandmother had been a natural chemist, a woman who understood the secrets held within leaves and petals. Amelia's dormant passion for botany, the one she had sacrificed for David's career, reawakened with a fierce intensity. She started experimenting, following the old recipes, and then improvising, using her forgotten knowledge of plant biology to refine them. She created a soothing balm from calendula and chamomile that healed the cuts on her hands. She developed a facial oil from rosehip and sea buckthorn that brought a glow back to her own grief-stricken face. She wasn't trying to build a business. She was trying to save herself. The act of creation was a balm for her soul. The cottage began to fill with the scent of drying herbs and essential oils, a fragrance of healing and renewal. One day, needing supplies from the nearest small town, she stumbled upon a local farmer's market. On a whim, she packed a small basket with a dozen jars of her coastal renewal balm. She hand-wrote the labels on simple brown paper. She didn't expect to sell anything, but a woman with weathered skin from years of fishing bought a jar, desperate for something to soothe her chapped hands. The following week, the woman returned and bought 5 more. "I don't know what you put in this stuff," she said, her voice filled with awe, "but it's like magic. My hands haven't felt this good in years. You should sell this online." The idea was a tiny spark. For the first time in months, Amelia felt a flicker of something other than pain ambition. Around the same time, a thick envelope arrived at the cottage's rusty mailbox, forwarded from her old address. It was from a law firm. David had filed for divorce. The papers were cold and clinical, citing irreconcilable differences and offering her a paltry settlement, a sum so insultingly small it was clear he assumed she was desperate and would take anything. Included was a letter from her own family's lawyer, a kind elderly man named Samuel Thompson, who had managed her parents' estate. He had been trying to reach her for months. "My dear Amelia," his letter read, "I am so sorry for what you are going through. Please know that this settlement offer is an insult. Your contribution to David's success was significant. Do not sign anything. Please call me." Finding a signal required a 20-minute hike to the top of a cliff overlooking the ocean. When she finally got through to Mr. Thompson, his voice was a welcome anchor of sanity. "Amelia." "Thank God. We've all been so worried," he said. "Forget David. We will handle him. Tell me, what have you been doing?" She hesitated, then told him everything: the cottage, the garden, the balms. She expected him to dismiss it as a hobby. Instead, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. "My wife has terrible eczema," he said, finally, his voice thoughtful. "She's tried every cream on the market. Nothing works. Send me a sample of what you've made. Send me everything you've made." Amelia did. A week later, Mr. Thompson called back. His voice was electric with excitement. "Amelia," he said, "my wife's skin is clearing up for the first time in a decade. This isn't just a hobby. What you have here is a miracle. I've been a corporate lawyer for 40 years. I know a winning product when I see one. Forget David's settlement. We're not just going to win your divorce. We're going to build you an empire." The phone call with Samuel Thompson was the catalyst that transformed Amelia's quiet healing into a quiet revolution. Mr. Thompson, a man who had spent his life navigating the cutthroat world of corporate mergers and intellectual property, saw in Amelia's handcrafted salves something far more valuable than a simple cosmetic authenticity. "The market is saturated with chemical-filled products from faceless corporations, Amy," he explained over a crackling line. "You have a story, a real powerful story. The granddaughter, the lost recipes, the wild coastal garden. That's something you can't manufacture." He flew out to Oregon a week later. Seeing the cottage, the garden, and Amelia's makeshift lab in the kitchen, his belief was cemented. He wasn't just her lawyer anymore. He became her first investor and mentor. He helped her form an LLC file for patents on her unique formulations and trademark a name, Aura Botanica. The transition from solitary artisan to businesswoman was staggering. Amelia moved from the cottage to a small rented workshop in Portland. The first year was a blur of relentless work. She spent her days perfecting her formulas and her nights studying business management and supply chain logistics online. She learned about sourcing organic ingredients, sustainable packaging, and the labyrinthine regulations of the skincare industry. There were countless setbacks. A batch of expensive rosehip oil was lost in shipping. An early packaging supplier delivered leaky bottles. The loneliness was profound. Many nights she'd collapse into bed, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of her ambition. The ghost of David's voice whispering, "What were you going to do?" "Sell homemade potpourri at a farmer's market." But now the voice didn't sting. It fueled her. She would wake up the next morning, drink her coffee while watching the sunrise, and get back to work. Mr. Thompson connected her with a brilliant young biochemist named Dr. Aris Thorne. Aris was a skeptic at first, accustomed to sterile labs and synthetic compounds. But when he analyzed Amelia's formulations, he was stunned. "This is extraordinary," he told her, peering at a sample under a microscope. "The molecular synergy. It's not something you can just design in a lab. It's like the plants are communicating. Your grandmother was a genius." Aris helped her scale up production without sacrificing the integrity of the ingredients. He became a trusted partner, his scientific rigor complementing her intuitive botanical knowledge. Together they built Aura Botanica from the ground up. They started by selling online their first customers, drawn in by a few beauty bloggers who had discovered the miracle balm from Oregon. The growth was explosive. The story sold itself. People were tired of artifice and hungry for something real. Aura Botanica was real. Amelia, once terrified of the spotlight, reluctantly became the face of her brand. But she didn't present a polished corporate version of herself. She appeared in their marketing videos wearing a simple linen shirt, her hands smudged with dirt from the garden, talking passionately about the power of plants. She was authentic, and the world fell in love with her. Within 2 years, Aura Botanica was on the shelves of high-end department stores. Within 3, they were expanding into international markets in Europe and Asia. The small workshop became a state-of-the-art, eco-friendly facility. Amelia, the woman who had been told she had nothing, was now the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. Throughout this meteoric rise, her divorce from David dragged on. He and his lawyers, sensing her burgeoning success, changed their tactics. They were no longer offering a paltry settlement. They were demanding half of her company, claiming it was a marital asset since she technically started experimenting while they were still legally married. Mr. Thompson shielded her from the worst of it, but the legal battle was a constant ugly shadow. David's depositions were filled with condescending claims. He painted her as an unstable hobbyist who got lucky, suggesting his initial financial support of their household was the seed money for her entire venture. Amelia refused to be distracted. She poured her energy into her work. She hired a team, delegated responsibilities, and proved to be a natural, decisive leader. The woman who once curated a perfect home now curated a thriving, ethical, and wildly successful business. On the 5th anniversary of the day she left Brooklyn, Aura Botanica was valued at over $900 million, following a massive investment from a Swiss conglomerate, Amelia Williams. The woman who had fled with nothing but a duffel bag and a broken heart was now one of the wealthiest self-made women in the country. She wasn't just a millionaire, she was on the verge of becoming a billionaire. She sat in her corner office, a sleek minimalist space with a panoramic view of the Portland skyline, and looked at the latest issue of Forbes magazine on her desk. On the cover was a photograph of her not in a power suit, but standing in a field of lavender, a serene smile on her face. The headline read, "The Natural Mogul, How Amelia Williams Turned a Lost Garden into a billion-dollar beauty empire." She ran a finger over the glossy image. She had done it. She had built a new world from the ashes of her old one. And now she felt a pull she hadn't expected. It was time to go back. Not for revenge, but for closure. It was time to face the man who had tried to erase her and show him the woman she had become. 5 years in the life of David Miller had been a slow, steady erosion. Life with Chloe was not the exhilarating escape he had imagined. The initial thrill of their clandestine affair had quickly curdled into the mundane reality of a relationship built on a foundation of deceit. Chloe was ambitious and sharp, but she lacked Amelia's warmth and intuitive kindness. Their sleek, modern apartment, a deliberate contrast to the cozy brownstone, felt cold and sterile. Professionally, David had stalled. The Hudson Yards project, which he'd believed would be his masterpiece, was plagued by budget overruns and design compromises. He had lost his spark. Without Amelia's quiet support and networking, he found himself struggling, his charm wearing thin. He and Chloe were living beyond their means, propped up by credit and the dwindling hope of a huge payout from his divorce settlement. David rarely thought of Amelia anymore. In his mind, she was a pathetic figure, probably living a meager existence somewhere, supported by the small alimony checks he begrudgingly sent. His lawyers told him she was fighting the divorce, and he interpreted it as the desperate clinging of a woman who couldn't let go. The idea that she could be thriving without him was simply inconceivable. On a grey Tuesday morning, David was in a meeting at his firm, Sterling and Vance. His boss, Jonathan Sterling, was presenting a market analysis for a new luxury spa project. The key demographic here is the affluent, wellness-conscious consumer, Sterling said, clicking to the next slide. They value authenticity, sustainability. They're buying into a lifestyle, a story. The brand that's completely cornered this market, the one we should be studying, is Aura Botanica. The name meant nothing to David. Sterling clicked again. A new slide filled the massive screen at the front of the boardroom. It was the cover of Forbes magazine. A woman stood in a field of lavender, her face serene, confident, and achingly familiar. The natural mogul. How Amelia Williams turned a lost garden into a billion-dollar beauty empire. A collective gasp went through the room. Heads turned to stare at David. His own world tilted on its axis. The blood drained from his face, leaving a cold, clammy sensation. It was Amelia, but it wasn't. The woman on the cover had his wife's face, but her eyes held a strength and self-possession he had never seen before. She looked powerful, untouchable. A billionaire. It was impossible. It was a joke. Amelia. Williams, one of the partners asked, looking from the screen to David. Is that your Amelia? David couldn't speak. He just stared, his mind struggling to process the information. The woman he had called boring, dependent, and ambitionless was on the cover of Forbes. The hobby he had mocked was now a billion-dollar empire. Every cruel word he had ever said to her came rushing back, each one a testament to his own staggering foolishness. The meeting ended in a blur. David stumbled back to his office in a daze. Chloe was waiting for him, holding a copy of the same magazine, her face a mask of fury and disbelief. "Have you seen this?" she hissed, slamming the magazine down on his desk. $1 billion, David. $1 billion. And you've been sending her pathetic little checks while her lawyers fight you for scraps. We should have been demanding half. We still can. Her words barely registered. David was consumed by a toxic cocktail of emotions. Shock, envy, and a profound, gut-wrenching sense of humiliation. He wasn't just wrong about Amelia. He had been catastrophically, spectacularly wrong. He had thrown away a diamond, believing it was a common stone. Chloe, however, saw only the money. "This changes everything," she said, her eyes gleaming with avarice. "Her company was started while you were married. Community property." "David, we can sue for half of the entire company. We could be set for life. You need to call your lawyer." Right now. The thought of Amelia's money was intoxicating. It could solve all their problems. It could give him the life of effortless luxury he felt he deserved. The humiliation began to morph into a twisted sense of entitlement. He had supported her for years. He was still her husband when she planted those first seeds. He had a right to it. "You're right," he said. The daze clearing, replaced by a cold, greedy resolve. She owes me. She owes us. He picked up the phone to call his lawyer, a new strategy forming in his mind. He wouldn't be the condescending husband anymore. He would be the aggrieved party, the supportive spouse whose wife had hidden a burgeoning empire from him. Meanwhile, in Manhattan, Aura Botanica was hosting its first major East Coast event, a charity gala at the Metropolitan Museum of Art to support environmental conservation. The guest of honor and keynote speaker was the company's reclusive founder and CEO. Amelia Williams had returned. She stood in a suite at the plaza looking out over Central Park. She was dressed in a simple, elegant, dark green gown that shimmered under the lights. Her only jewelry, a pair of delicate leaf-shaped diamond earrings. Aris Thorne stood beside her, offering a supportive smile. "Ready to face the lions?" he asked softly. Amelia took a deep breath, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. "I'm not the one who should be afraid, Aris," she said, her voice calm and steady. "I'm not the prey anymore." She knew David would see the magazine. She knew he would come for her. In fact, she was counting on it. The battle wasn't just for her company anymore. It was for her story, and she was finally ready to tell it. The gala at the Met was the crown jewel of the New York social season. The air buzzed with the clinking of champagne glasses and the murmur of influential voices. Art, fashion, and finance collided under the soaring ceilings of the Temple of Dendur. But tonight, the center of this glittering universe was Amelia Williams. She moved through the crowd with an understated grace that commanded more attention than any ostentatious display of wealth ever could. She was poised, articulate, and genuinely passionate as she spoke about her company's conservation efforts. The shy, insecure woman who had hosted David's dinner parties was gone, replaced by a confident leader who looked every person she met directly in the eye. David and Chloe arrived uninvited. Chloe had secured tickets through a contact, her determination fueled by a desperate greed. She wore a tight, sequined dress that was slightly too loud for the elegant affair, while David looked uncomfortable in his tuxedo, a man out of his depth. They stood in the shadows of a towering Egyptian statue, watching Amelia from afar. For David, seeing her in person was a far more visceral shock than seeing her on a magazine cover. She radiated a calm power that was both captivating and infuriating. This was the woman he had discarded. This was the life, the adoration, the respect, the success that he felt should have been his. "Look at her," Chloe whispered venomously, her nails digging into his arm. "Playing the queen. This is our money, David. Our life. You need to go over there, confront her. Don't let her get away with this." Driven by Chloe's relentless pushing and his own bruised ego, David began to cross the floor. Heads turned as he approached the circle of people surrounding Amelia. A hush fell over the group as he stopped directly in front of her. Amelia didn't look surprised. She simply finished her sentence, excused herself from the conversation with a polite smile, and turned to face him. Her expression was perfectly neutral, revealing nothing. "David," she said, her voice as smooth and cool as river stone. "This is an unexpected surprise." "Amelia, we need to talk," he said, trying to sound firm, but coming across as merely desperate. "What you've done, hiding all of this from me while we're still married, it's fraud." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Amelia's lips. "Is it? I seem to recall you being intimately aware of my hobby, as you called it. You found it quite boring, if I remember correctly." The quiet accuracy of her words hit him like a physical blow. He glanced around, realizing they were drawing an audience. He lowered his voice. "This isn't the place. But don't think for a second you can cut me out. My lawyers will be in touch. We were married. I am entitled to half of everything." It was at that moment that Chloe, unable to contain herself, strode forward and stood beside David, a caricature of the supportive partner. "She's right, Amelia. You owe him. He supported you when you were nothing. Amelia's gaze flickered to Chloe, a look of mild curiosity, as if observing an interesting but irrelevant species of insect. Then her eyes returned to David, and for the first time they turned icy cold. "Let me be perfectly clear, David," she said, her voice dropping but losing none of its power. "You are entitled to nothing. The man I was married to declared to my face that I was ambitionless and worthless. He made his choice. He chose to build his future with this woman." She gave Chloe a dismissive glance. "The assets you're trying to claim were not built from our marriage. They were built from its ashes. Ashes you created." She took a small step closer, forcing him to meet her gaze. "You didn't invest in my company. You didn't believe in me. You abandoned me. The only thing you are entitled to is the memory of your own colossal misjudgment. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a gala to host." She turned her back on them, a simple, devastatingly final gesture. Two discreet but imposing security guards materialized, flanking David and Chloe. "Sir." "Madam, I believe you are ready to leave," one of them said quietly but firmly. Humiliation washed over David in a hot wave. They were being escorted out like common gate crashers. As they were steered toward the exit, the crowd parted their faces, a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. David caught one last glimpse of Amelia. She was laughing with a group of people, Dr. Aris Thorne at her side, her back straight, her head held high. She hadn't even watched them leave. To her, they were already gone. Outside on the cold stone steps of the Met, the reality of their situation crashed down on them. The illusion of a quick, massive payday had been shattered. They had been dismissed effortlessly and absolutely. "Don't you worry," Chloe seethed, her face twisted with rage. "This isn't over. There are other ways. We will find something, some piece of leverage. We will make her pay." But David barely heard her. He was staring at the lights of the city, haunted by the image of the woman he had so casually destroyed, and the queen she had become in his absence. He had made the biggest mistake of his life, and he was only just beginning to understand its true cost. The confrontation at the gala was not an end, but the opening salvo in a war David was determined to win. Publicly humiliated and privately seething, he saw Amelia's newfound strength as the ultimate betrayal. Fueled by Chloe's relentless avarice and his own cavernous insecurity, he weaponized the law. His legal team, a pack of notoriously aggressive sharks from a top Manhattan firm, launched a full-scale assault. They filed a blizzard of motions, attempting to portray Amelia as a cunning manipulator who had siphoned marital funds to secretly build her empire, all while playing the part of the devoted wife. They demanded access to every email, every financial statement, every note from Aura Botanica's inception, convinced they could construct a narrative that entitled David to half of his wife's billion-dollar fortune. From her suite in New York, Amelia watched the storm gather, but she felt no fear. She felt a cold, clear focus. This was the final ugly remnant of her old life, and it needed to be purged. While David's team was generating headlines, Mr. Thompson's was operating in the shadows. He had assembled a discreet team of the best forensic accountants in the country, men and women who could find a single fraudulent digit in a mountain of data. "He's arrogant, Amelia," Mr. Thompson had told her. His voice grim but steady. "And arrogant men who cheat in one part of their life rarely have the discipline to stay clean in another. They believe they are untouchable. We just need to find the one lie he thought he buried deep enough." They found it. Not one lie, but a web of them intricately woven into the very fabric of David's magnum opus, the Hudson Yards Project. It was a masterpiece of deception. The accountants uncovered a series of shell corporations registered in Delaware, used to bill the project for non-existent consulting fees. They traced those fees back to an offshore account controlled by David. They found evidence of collusion with a primary materials supplier, where David had signed off on lower-grade structural steel and pocketed a substantial kickback, compromising the integrity of the building itself. The paper trail was undeniable, a damning chronicle of greed that had started years before Amelia had even packed her bag. He hadn't just been stealing from his partners. He had been endangering the public for personal gain. When Mr. Thompson presented the findings bound in a simple but heavy black binder, Amelia felt a profound sense of sadness. It was the final definitive proof that the man she had loved was a complete illusion. There was a temptation, a dark and seductive whisper in her mind, to release it all, to call the district attorney to leak it to the New York Times, and to watch the empire of David Miller burn to the ground. Aris Thorne, who had been her rock through the ordeal, saw the conflict in her eyes. "Whatever you decide," he said, placing a hand gently on her shoulder, "it should be the decision that sets you free." His words clarified everything. Revenge was a chain, not a key. It would tie her to David's fate, forcing her to watch his trial, to read his name in the headlines for years to come. Freedom was a clean cut, a final silent severing. "We won't leak it," she announced, her voice resonating with newfound certainty. "We will use it to buy my peace. That's more valuable than any revenge." The final settlement meeting was scheduled at Mr. Walt Thompson's office, a place that felt like a bastion of old-world integrity. Its walls were metal-lined with leather-bound legal texts, and the air smelled of wood polish and history. David and Chloe arrived looking polished and triumphant. They had just won a minor procedural motion in court, and they strode in with the smug assurance of victors, believing Amelia had been summoned to surrender. Their lawyer, a slick man named Marcus Thorne, spread his files out on the vast mahogany desk as if he owned the room. "All right, Samuel," Marcus began, addressing Mr. Thompson with practiced condescension. "I assume we're here to finally discuss a realistic settlement figure. My client is prepared to be generous, but the clock is ticking." David leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing on his lips. He looked at Amelia, expecting to see a woman on the verge of collapse. Instead, he saw only a deep, unnerving calm. She hadn't said a word, her hands resting peacefully in her lap. "Before we discuss figures, Marcus," Mr. Thompson said, his tone dangerously mild, "my client has one final piece of discovery to share. We felt it was more appropriate to present it here rather than in open court." With a slow, deliberate movement, he slid the heavy black binder across the polished surface of the desk. It landed in front of Marcus with a soft, definitive thud. "What's this?" Marcus asked, annoyed by the theatricality. "More sob stories about your client's garden." "Open it," Amelia said. It was the first time she had spoken, and her voice cut through the room clear and sharp as glass. Marcus sighed and opened the binder. The first page was a summary of findings. He read it, his eyebrows arching in amusement. He turned the page to a complex flow chart of bank transfers. His amusement faded. He flipped again and again, his eyes scanning financial statements, copies of falsified invoices, and sworn affidavits from a disgruntled former employee of the contracting firm. The color drained from his face. He began to sweat, his slick confidence melting away under the fluorescent lights. He looked up from the binder, no longer at Mr. Thompson, but at David, his expression a mixture of horror and accusation. David, seeing his lawyer's reaction, felt the first prickle of genuine fear. "What is it? It's a bluff." "Is it David?" Chloe snapped, her voice tight with anxiety. "What did you do?" Amelia finally stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the people moving through Bryant Park below. "What he did," she said, her back to them, "was build his career on a foundation of lies. Not just the personal ones, he told me, but professional ones that constitute multiple felonies. Fraud, embezzlement, racketeering. The kind of crimes that don't just end a career, but result in long, unpleasant prison sentences." She turned back to face them. Her eyes were devoid of hatred or anger. They held only a vast, weary finality. "That binder contains everything the U.S. Attorney's Office would need to secure a conviction. Given that the fraud began while we were still married, his legal team would no doubt try to implicate me. It would be a messy, public, and mutually destructive process." She walked back to the desk and placed her palms flat on the wood. "Or we can choose a different path, right here, right now." She slid a single document and a pen across the desk. "This is a divorce settlement. It stipulates that you will drop every single claim against me and my company, effective immediately. You will renounce any right to spousal support. You will walk away with the assets you acquired in your own name and all the debts that come with them. You will sign this, and in return, that binder gets placed in a vault. As long as you and Miss Vance here disappear from my life permanently and completely, it will remain there. The moment you violate that, a copy will be delivered to the authorities. The choice is yours, a clean break or total annihilation." The silence in the room was absolute. Chloe stared at the binder as if it were a venomous snake. The future she had fantasized about, the yachts, the mansions, the endless river of Amelia's money, had vanished, replaced by the terrifying image of visiting David in a prison jumpsuit. David stared at Amelia, his mind finally painfully grasping the full scale of his miscalculation. He had seen her as a soft, sentimental creature he could easily crush. He had never imagined she possessed this kind of steely, strategic brilliance. She hadn't come to fight him on his terms. She had changed the entire game. His lawyer, Marcus, quietly cleared his throat. "Sign the paper, David." With a trembling hand, David reached for the pen. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the hollowed-out look of a man who had lost everything. As the nib scratched across the paper, the sound was deafening. It was the sound of his final surrender, the signing away of his last desperate claim on her. He pushed the document back, unable to meet her eyes. Amelia nodded curtly to Mr. Thompson. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the office. She didn't look back. Down on the street, the crisp autumn air felt like the first breath of a new life. The weight that she had carried for 5 years, the grief, the anger, the struggle, the fight, had finally lifted. She was free. Her life after that day unfolded with a quiet, beautiful purpose. Aura Botanica thrived, becoming a global symbol of ethical business and natural integrity. But Amelia's focus had shifted from balance sheets to wild landscapes. She poured her energy and wealth into the Aura Botanica Foundation, acquiring and rewilding vast tracts of land, protecting endangered ecosystems. Her partnership with Aris grew from a shared passion for science into a deep, abiding love built on a foundation of trust and mutual admiration. They were a team in the lab and in life. Occasionally she would hear whispers about David. His career had imploded under a cloud of rumors and a quiet internal investigation at his firm. He and Chloe had split acrimoniously, their relationship unable to survive the death of their shared financial dream. He lived in the shadow of what he had done forever, glancing over his shoulder, a prisoner not of the state, but of the secrets only he and Amelia knew. Amelia, however, rarely thought of him. Her world was filled with the scent of damp earth after a rain, the excitement of a new botanical discovery, and the warmth of Aris's hand in hers. One evening, years later, she was walking through the restored gardens of her grandmother's cottage on the Oregon coast, the place where her new life had begun. The setting sun painted the sky in hues of rose and gold. She knelt down, her hands sinking into the rich soil, the same soil that had healed her and given her a future. She had taken the ugliest betrayal and cultivated from it a life of extraordinary beauty. Her greatest success wasn't the billion-dollar empire. It was this peace, this strength, this profound, unshakable sense of self. She was finally and completely home. Amelia's story is a powerful reminder that our lowest moments do not have to define us. Betrayal can feel like the end of the world, a deep wound that seems impossible to heal. But within that pain, there is often an undiscovered strength, a resilience we never knew we possessed. She didn't seek revenge in the traditional sense. Her victory was in building a life so full, so successful, and so authentic that the man who broke her became nothing more than a footnote in her incredible story. She found her worth not in a man's approval, but in the soil of her own garden, in the challenges of building a business, and in the quiet confidence of her own capabilities. Her ultimate success wasn't the money, it was her freedom. If this story of resilience, transformation, and ultimate triumph moved you, please take a moment to hit that like button. It truly helps our channel grow. Share this story with someone who might need to hear that it's possible to rebuild from the ashes. And most importantly, if you want more real-life dramas that will inspire and captivate you, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Thank you for listening.